Welcome to Vineyard Church Dungannon, where we're walking together deeper into faith. The following message was given at one of our Sunday gatherings. For more information, visit vineyarddungannon.co.uk.
So, today is Daniel 6, Daniel and the Lion's Den. Excuse me. So, chapter 6 begins with the words, "It pleased Darius." So, chapter 5 was Belshazzar. So, what happened to him? Or what happened in this gulf between the two? Well, at the end of chapter 5, Babylon falls to the Median-Persian Empire. Belshazzar is killed, and Darius is appointed as the new king over the kingdom of Babylon and Persia. Bradley. So there's a few things just to go around before we start going into Daniel. Chapter 6 mirrors chapter 3. So it's an interesting way that Daniel is wrote. The chapters all mirror each other. So chapter 6 mirrors chapter 3. It's all about persecution and deliverance. Chapter 7 mirrors chapter 2, which is about the 4 different empires. And chapter 5 mirrors chapter 4, where God judges a king, both Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. And we'll talk about the other ones later on, because this will be the last talk on Daniel. We're going to break and have our Easter ones and then get back into Daniel after again, with the very easy chapter 7, Johnny. So, we read in, Daniel is one of 3 placed above others in the new political system. So the land's been taken over. Whenever that happens, they put in their new political system, and those people that are going to run the country or run the kingdom. So he's placed over 40 satraps because of his faithfulness and how well he served the various kings that came before. And normally, whenever there's an overthrow like this, those who are put in the positions of power are those from the invading kingdom, those who have served the king well so far. It's like in the general election, if Conservative wins and Labour's kicked out, they don't keep a pile of the Labour ministers in. They put in all their own guys. But here we have a guy from the old regime kept and put, not only just kept, but put high above others. So Daniel 6, verse 1 to 3. Now it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule through the kingdom, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel, to whom these satraps were accountable, so that the king would not suffer loss. Soon, by his extraordinary spirit, Daniel distinguished himself among the administrators and satraps. So the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So through all this, Daniel was proving himself, proving he was loyal, proving that he was trustworthy, as he had been to the other kings before. So you can imagine the satraps were not one bit pleased with this whole situation. Here they have this Babylonian placed in charge of them. So there'd be jealousy there of his position. But not only that, these guys were corrupt. They were used to laying on their pockets, skimming from the top. What the king doesn't know won't hurt him. We can snub a bit here and a bit there and a bit there. King will never know. We get more money, we get more power, we have a better lifestyle. So while they're doing all this, then they have Daniel placed over them. This straight-laced goody two-shoes placed above them, who isn't going to put up with any of that. He honestly serves his ruler. And imagine that, like just appointing someone who was trustworthy to make sure that you got all your money, that you were accounted for, all your taxes and stuff. So not only was it hurtful in a jealous way that he was placed above them, but he was costing them money. He was taking money out of their pockets. So they set out to think of a way to set Daniel up, to remove him from the position that he'd been given and get back to getting all the money that they had before. Now, they know that they won't be able to dig up any dirt on his character because of his integrity. So they decide to appeal to King Darius, or more accurately, to his pride. So Daniel 6:6-9. So the administrators and satraps went together to the king and said, O King Darius, may you live forever. All the royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce a decree that for 30 days anyone who petitions any god or man except you, O king, will be thrown into the den of lions. Therefore, O king, establish the decree and sign the document so that it cannot be changed in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. So these guys were up, they were sucking up to him, they were blowing him up, saying, oh, you're like a god. You know, these people have to pray to you or through you or in your name. And if they don't, well, that just proves that they're not loyal to you, so we'll just throw them into the den and have them killed. But there's a few things that could strike you from that. Obviously Daniel or Darius falls hook, line, and sinker for this. You know, he's all puffed up. He thinks this is a great idea. But how could they possibly police this law or this decree? Prayers are private. They couldn't listen to everyone's prayer throughout the whole land or on the temples or anything like that. Like how would they go around catching these people? Well, I suppose that the actual truth is that they weren't looking to catch anyone, only Daniel. He was the only person that they were looking to catch, no one else. So Daniel 6:10-11. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the window was open towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they knew exactly where to go. They knew that he always prayed towards Jerusalem through an open window because he declares his prayers out to the people that may pass by. He's not hiding away and hiding his God from people. He's been very open and honest about who he follows, who his God is, and speaks that out. So he goes home and prays facing Jerusalem, where the temple used to be. The temple was where the Jews met with God, where the priest made sacrifice to atone for a person's sin so they could be made clean. This is where you went to pray to God, to be in the presence of the Most High. So there's something interesting I need to pause and put in here about the whole book of Daniel. There's a chronological order of the book, isn't how it is in the Bible. So you have chapters 1-4, then you have 7-8. 5 sneaks in after that, then 9, then jumps to 6, and then 10, 11, 12. So chapter 7 has already happened before this, before chapter 6. So in chapter 7, a bit of a spoiler alert. Apologies, Johnny, a bit of a spoiler alert. Daniel saw in his vision one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Now the term Son of Man means human. So he's seen a human coming on the clouds, which is weird. But whenever you put in that coming on the clouds or coming with the clouds of heaven, it means that it's God as deity in human form, as only the deities can travel on the clouds. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. So that means Daniel has already seen. I know this is hard to keep up with. It took me a good while to get my head around it. Daniel has already seen the second coming of the Messiah. Daniel's already seen Jesus coming back after coming the first time. He hasn't happened yet. So it's very weird, but it's very cool at the same time. So Daniel has saw Jesus come to Jerusalem to rule in full authority of the Ancient of Days, or God the Father. So question, is Daniel in fact not just praying towards the temple or Jerusalem? Is he in fact praying to Jesus? That he has already seen, that knows it's going to come down where the temple was? That's for you to decide, that's not for me to tell you. So Daniel has seen the future hope of the world when Jesus comes back. He knows that all things are going to be made new, there'll be no more sickness or death, and that God's kingdom has come to reign throughout the earth. So back to the story. So the satraps go to Darius after this, after they've heard him praying out through the window, And they basically say to him, that decree, that one you put in place there, that everybody had to pray to or through you, is that still going on? Like, is that still happening? Darius says, of course it is. He says, I made a law and that can't be changed. All right. Daniel, or the satrap, said to Darius again, so everybody that in that decree that you put in place, everyone had to pray to or through you, yeah? Well, your man, that guy from Judah, the guy, that guy that you really liked and put over us and said that he was great and that we had to work under, well, he's ignoring you. He prays to his God through an open window that everyone can hear 3 times a day. What are you going to do about it? Kind of thing. So I think that at this point there's probably realization dawns on Darius' face, and he knows he's been played. He fell for the flattery, he fell for the tricks. And what can he do? Because he really likes Daniel. What's he going to do? How's he going to get Daniel out of all the consequences? But he can't. All day he tries. And then in the evening even, the satraps come back and say that the laws and decrees of the Medians and Persians cannot be changed. King Darius. Well, I suppose as king, actually, Darius could change it. Darius could have lifted him out of the consequences. He could have pardoned Daniel, but he would look weak in front of his kingdom. He would look like a weak leader. So it would say something about him and how his kingship, his leadership. So Darius chooses to remain an unfaltering leader and doesn't lose face and doesn't renege on his decisions. So Daniel 6:16-18. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. So the decree is carried through. Daniel is brought to Darius and sealed in the lion's den. And all along I thought that the lion's den was the punishment. It was a punishment for praying to Yahweh, praying to Daniel's God. But the more I've read about it and looked at it, it's something called a trial by ordeal. Kind of like the witch hunts of the past, where a woman was accused of being a witch. She would have been tied up and thrown in a body of water. If she sank and drowned, she wasn't guilty of being a witch, but she was dead. If she floated, she was taken out and stoned or burnt alive. So she was dead. So that's an unfair trial by ordeal. So likewise, this is the design for the the trial by ordeal for Daniel in the lion's den. But there is, in Numbers 5:11-31, there's an example of a fair trial by ordeal, the test for an unfaithful wife. This is where a husband suspects his wife of being unfaithful. She takes them to the altar or to the temple, talks to the priest. The priest goes and gets holy water, bends down, lifts some dust from the floor, sprinkles it in the water, and gives it to the wife to drink. Now, the dust in the water probably won't do you any harm. It's dust after all. But this is where God intervenes, and God says they're guilty or not guilty. Because if the woman's guilty of an affair or being unfaithful, God will close her womb and she'd be unable to have children. So there's this opportunity of both outcomes. Whereas in the den of lions, if you're thrown in a den of lions, you die 100% of the time. So move on to Daniel 19-23. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near to the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lion. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found in him, because he had trusted in God. So there you have this den of lions, roaring lions, hungry. They kept them hungry so that they could throw people in. It's just like an example of their power, of their punishments. So Daniel's safe and well, and Darius is overjoyed. Darius has spent the night fasting and didn't sleep. I suppose another question there, was he praying to the living God? Was he praying to Daniel's God for Daniel's rescue? Because after all, he acknowledges Daniel's God as the living God. So Daniel describes his rescue and declares his innocence both in the eyes of God and in the eyes of King Darius. Then the king has Daniel's accusers and their families thrown into the lion's den, and before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. The lions were most certainly hungry. Now, interestingly there, they didn't just throw the accusers in, they threw all the family in. And that's just to prevent any revenge. You know, if you're a new king, a new leader, you don't want a family or a group or a tribe of people coming in to attack you to try and kill you as revenge for killing their family. So he had them all killed. Daniel 25-28. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. Very similar to King Nebuchadnezzar. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed and his dominion will never end. He rescues and saves, he performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So King Darius, like Nebuchadnezzar, concluded that Daniel's God is the one true God. He declares God's sovereignty, his power, his kingdom, that it will not be destroyed but will remain forever. I suppose we could draw out a wee bit now of the lion's den. Was it a foretelling of Jesus in the tomb? The satraps represent the Pharisees setting a trap, in this case for Daniel, but the Pharisees set a trap for Jesus. They tried to catch him all the time to crucify him, kill him, get him out so that they would be back. People would follow them once again. Daniel represents the innocence of Jesus, sent to die through no wrongdoing, but because of the lies of others. King Darius is in the likeness of Pilate at the beginning, not wanting to sentence Daniel to death, but unwilling to take on the repercussions of setting him free the same way Pilate didn't want to set him free in case of what would come, what would happen. Both the pit and the tomb are sealed by a heavy stone. As you notice, the stone over the pit was sealed with a wax seal, and the tomb was just rolled over. It's a look to life and death. Death can't push away a stone, where life could possibly break the seal and get out of the pit. So it's just a bit of a contrast there. So the following morning, Darius was like the women who went to look for Jesus on the third day. Only when Darius calls out, he believes that Daniel's God has saved his servant. He calls out for the living where the dead should be, in the pit. Excuse me. He believes that Daniel's God has saved his servant, hoping and trusting that Daniel's God has done it. Daniel's God has done it, yeah. Whereas Mary Magdalene and the other women, when they went looking for Jesus' body, they had forgotten what Jesus had told them. They were looking for the dead amongst the living, instead of looking for the living amongst the dead. Luke 24, 1-8. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of the sinners, be crucified, and on the third day will be raised again." Then they remembered his words. So what? So what? What does Daniel tell us? I love it. Sharon come up to us, and so what? What's our call? Our call is to be faithful and trustworthy workers with integrity. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for human masters. We are called to be faithful to God above all else, at all costs. Revelation 2:10, do not be afraid of what you're about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Be faithful to God in the places and spaces He has called you. Whether that's your work, or whether that's here in your church, is it in your friendship groups, is it in your college, is it in your dentist, wherever, is it your pizza shop. Be faithful to God. Our call is to be faithful, trustworthy workers with integrity. We are to be faithful to God above all else, at all costs. Be faithful to God in the places and spaces He's called you to.
Thanks for listening to this message. For more information on what's happening in the life of our church, visit vineyarddungannon.co.uk.